In this video, we are going to see how to implement Webview in Android Studio. So we are going to start a new project. I'm going to name it Food Blogs. I am choosing API level 15. You can choose whatever you want. There are a number of options. By clicking finish, the Gradle will start building. It takes time for Gradle to build. In the activity main file, we will see the layout for our Android project. I am going to remove the title bar that appears in the emulator. I prefer it that way. So I am not going to give any action bar. So to begin with our layout, we have to go to the XML file, and in here I am going to use linear layout. So first I want a text view that says food blogs. I am going to mention the width and the height. There are also various attributes, so I'm going to give it text. And I'm going to mention the size. We can also give color to our text view, and we can customize the colors. So in values, the colors.xml file, we can add the colors that we want actually. So I'm going to add purple and yellow color. There is a certain code for each color, and you can get that code on the internet. So for the purpose of this video, I have already copy pasted the codes in a text editor. So I'm just gonna copy that and paste it there. So now that the colors are added, we can actually use them here. I'm going to give text color yellow and background with purple color. Actually, I'm going to increase the width of the text view to match parent so that it looks nice. So moving on, now we will have our horizontal scroll view in which we are going to place the buttons. So mentioning the width and the height. In that I am going to add another layout, that is linear layout, so that all the buttons are added linearly. I am going to give the orientation horizontal because I want the buttons horizontally to each other. So even though I've mentioned the orientation is horizontal, the buttons are coming adjacent to the food block. That is because we have not mentioned the orientation for the first linear layout. So I have to mention it there that we want it vertically there. And now we're just mentioning the ID. For each element it is necessary to mention the ID because we use that in the Java file. I'm going to give the name as blog1 and size as 20 dp. So now we can just copy the code and paste it as the number of times you want it. So I'm just gonna give 6 buttons so that I can show the implementation of horizontal scroll. Now I'm going to change the ID for each button because it has to be different for each element that you add. I'm also changing the name. So now to make the layout look proper, I'm just going to add a margin top in the horizontal scroll view so it looks neat. And I'm going to run the code and see. It takes time, so I'm just going to fast forward to the output. So here's how our horizontal scroll view looks, and you can actually scroll through it. Now it is time for our web view. I'm giving the ID as web view as well. So now that I'll click on the button, I'll get the web view. So code for that should be written in the Java file. So we'll declare the web view and the buttons here. We have 6 buttons, so you have to mention accordingly. So this is basically identifying the button with the ID that we have mentioned. And then we are just gonna set an on-click listener. In this space, we will mention what exactly the web view should look like when the button is clicked. So we are gonna give find view by ID. So what webview.load URL does is it loads the link that we have mentioned. So we can paste any link. For the purpose of this video, I've already copy pasted some links in the text editor, so I'm just gonna put it there. So now by clicking the first button, now we're gonna run the code and see that if we get the output or not. So by clicking the button, we will get an error that is clear text not permitted. So for this, we have to again in the manifest file add a line of code. That is uses clear text traffic. We have to set it to true. So now when we run the code, we won't get that error. but we will get another error, that is error cache miss. So when we load the web view, we should have the internet permission, so we have to mention them always, otherwise the web view won't load. So this is an important thing to remember. And now when we run the code, we will get the output this time. So this is the web view that is loaded. So now that the code has given its perfect output, we can give the implementation to other buttons as well. So I'm just going to copy paste the code and just change the name for each button. And I'm going to also change the links so that it displays different web page by clicking different buttons. So I've already copy pasted the few links in the editor, so I'm just going to put it there. Just gonna fast forward it, and now we've copy pasted all the links. We'll also change the ID for each button, because then we'll get an error. Now we can finally run our code. So in the output we can see that the web page is loaded. By clicking each button we can check. So sometimes what happens is when we click, the web view is opened in the browser. So for it not to happen, we have to add a line of code. And then we'll copy paste it in every button code block. So now the buttons look a little dull, so we can add color to them as well. So I'm just going to add yellow color and copy paste it in other buttons as well. so it is consistent. And then at last we'll finally run our code and see the output. So by clicking the buttons, the web page is loaded. You can also scroll and check. So that's it. So when we run the code, now there is a scroll bar you can see when we scroll through the horizontal view. So we could write a code which will not display the scroll bar if we wish to do so. So when I write scroll bar to none, when I set the value to none, it won't display the scroll bar. So now we'll run it and see. So there is no scroll bar here. One big problem with this code is there is no web page displayed by default, so that looks a bit odd. So we'll also give a web page by default. We can only see the web page when we click the button, so we should change that. Okay, so we will just remove the action that we gave to button 1 so that it will display the web page by default. It is a very simple way to do that. Now this web page will load the first URL by default, and after that if we click to another button, then the other web pages will be loaded. So we'll optimize and then we will just run the code. And now in the output we can see that the web page was loaded earlier, and then by clicking on another button we can just go on next web page. But when I click on blog 1, there is no web view because we have not given action to it. So we will quickly do that so that the web view is loaded by default also, and also it will load when the button is clicked, so the user can access it by that as well. So we'll change the ID quickly because it is important to change the ID, and then we'll declare the button. First I'll copy the link, and now when we run the code, the blog is loaded, and the blog 2 is loaded. But now when we click blog 1, it is also loaded. So